Might want to fix that. Yeah, welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for another dire discussions.
Dire discussions about dire events in these dire times we live in.
Of course, as always, is my co-host and producer, Fox Trevize.
You didn't sound very excited about that.
I was smiling when I said it.
I came in with all this energy, and you're like, yeah, here's Fox. He's here. He exists.
This is the Fox.
Like, you've acknowledged my existence as like the bare minimum of what I can hope for.
Well, sorry, but we are happy to have you here. So, what we're going to be discussing today is updates on CHAZ, CHOP, and Antifa, and all that bullshit around statues and all that stuff going on, right?
All kinds of stuff.
So, I've had a feeling when I saw, was it early today or yesterday, when I saw that Democrat senator had been attacked by the protesters that
that was nuts.
Yeah, so that was I have notes on that actually. It was State Senator Tim Carpenter from Wisconsin. And he was heading to the Capitol to work late when he was stopped to take a snapshot, a photo of the protest. When suddenly they confronted him, because you know how they don't like media. They don't like anyone taking pictures of them, because when you show them being them, it's obvious that they're the baddies.
Are we the bad? Yes, you're the baddies.
It's hard to make wanted destruction of property and the random assault of people look good, so generally they just want to beat you down if you have a camera. So they punched and kicked him in the head, neck, and ribs, and he may have a concussion. And his the sock of his eye is a little blurry, and his neck and sores are sore as well. His neck and ribs are sore.
Did we get Nancy to like call out and like condemn and disavow that?
No, but everyone on the Democrat side did come out and say that, yes, he was injured during a peaceful protest.
Yeah, he has a black eye, like a peaceful black eye. It's probably in blackface for having his black eye, so we should probably beat him up again.
Well, as we learned from one representative of Antifa who was talking, I think it was on Tucker Carlson, is that us white people shouldn't have the assumption of safety if black people don't have that same assumption. So we can't in society expect to be safe.
Well, I could say that somebody who's expecting me to be unsafe could probably expect to have a few holes in them. How about that?
Yes, and that sounds like a good strategy. So it's like, well, because a very minority of police officers
and minority police officers.
Yes, and in a tiny fraction of the total number of interactions between police officers and black individuals, during that minute fraction, sometimes they are killed, and sometimes they are killed because of unjust circumstances. But those unjust circumstances make up a very tiny fraction of those times when they are killed. Because of that tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction of instances that are wrong and require a correction, even though those same kinds of situations happen to people of other races in greater quantities. But because of that meaningless factoid, it is okay to attack people based on their skin color as long as they are white. It is genius. How could we not have seen it?
Yeah, but that gets into the problem where I think we've been out of this for a long time. That's buying into the premise, right? So like we bought into the premise that okay, well they just want to get rid of the Confederate statues, but now they want to get after the founding fathers because they're slave owners, and now they just want to get after statues because it's really just about want and destruction. And so it's really they will use, and this is I think it's actually one of the tactics and rules for radicals, although I'm not versed well enough to cite a specific rule. I believe it's really just use any excuse that you possibly can, and as soon as one excuse doesn't work, just try another one. So it's not about that they want to be violent to, or that they think it's justified to be violent to white people because of this little thing, this police brutality that is a rounding error in the statistics for what they're specifically complaining about. That's not really the reason. They really just want to be violent to white people. They want to be violent to the rich. They want to be violent to anyone that will not fall in line with them. And the police, the fake statistics that they're citing on police brutality against blacks, that's just the excuse de jure of the modern time. If for some reason the media hadn't just bought that hook, line, and sinker, they would have just rotated to a different one.
Yeah. So what the cultural Marxists have done very effectively, and then you could even say this in some outside...
The cultural Marxist was very 6 months ago. When it was, I mean, even a couple of years ago, perhaps. That was when it was actually in the culture. Now that they're burning shit down and pulling down statues and beating people up in the streets, they're just actual Marxists. They have no qualifier of culture anymore. It's just Marxist writ large.
Cool. I'm just going to finish my sentence now. So, what the cultural Marxists have been very successful at, as well as there have been people who, I would say, other nation states who are also trying to get involved in screwing up our country, is they've managed to create generations of people who are very, very stupid, have no critical thinking ability, and they are driven very much by this very, very radical, dogmatic, not factual-based ideology. And what they've managed to divide up society, so it's all these different little groups. They try to divide us into the tiniest little groups as possible. Every little identity group has its own tribe, and yes, some of them intersect in when they are teaming up against. Now. Yes, flags and individual subcultures that are considered dominant over the total culture. This is a strategy to break up the unity of the country so that there is not one unity of effort or any kind of joint goals of society. Now it's society fighting itself in all these little groups, but the people who are not affected by this are the people in power. And I honestly think that there's a lot of different groups here. Like there's a lot of moving parts, but the radicals think they are going to have a gigantic revolution where they get in power, and then magically they are going to know how to do things better. But really, what it's going to end up doing is they just want to have power, right? To do the atrocities that they blame the other side of doing. They just want the power to do it themselves. But they're not going to actually have the ability to do that. I think that the elites in the Democrat Party mostly have just been using them as a tool for maintaining power because they are helping divide the country for them. And as long as we are fighting each other, we're not fighting them.
Well, and it's some of the Democrats. So you got some of the Democrats that kind of Nancy is, for as awful as a human being as she absolutely is, she is.
I'm not convinced she's a human.
For as awful as a human suit wearing lizard person as she is, she is very. Yeah, we gotta make sure I use the right pronouns for her. Lizard person, lizard Z. There you go. She is very, very good, and she's been very good at staying ahead of the politics to stay in power. She's much more ruthless than really any of the other Democrats are at least in the federal government. And so I think that, people like her, you got people from California, kind of like Chicago, they breed these really vicious politicians. You've got Maxine there. She'll say absolutely anything. Obviously, we know Adam Schiff will say absolutely anything. And there's mixed in there's actually a lot more of the kind of older school Democrats, and I don't mean older school as in like they had better policies, just that they actually were part of the Democrat Party, whereas you have some of these I guess the leaders, for lack of a better term, they've kind of adapted to the new circumstance. But the Democrat Party by and large, it's just incidental that they are in power or have power. As we see with Ocasio-Cortez, what she said was, her and Biden, it baffles her that they are actually in the same party. And that's really the truth of it. It's just the Democrat Party is the closest thing to the 18 light years away on the left that the Antifa and the quote-unquote revolutionaries are now. And so that's just where they look over, and that's just where the Democrats are. They're the kind of default that's what they would have their political power be. But it's really not even, for the most part, it's not even most of the Democrats. As we can see with this guy that we were talking about in, Wisconsin. He's getting drug out in the streets and getting his ass beat. And that's going to be the fate for really 9 out of 10 Democrats, honestly. If this keeps going, right? Certainly I have my doubts that they're actually going to achieve I have my doubts that they would be able to achieve a stable revolution in the way that, say, China did. Certainly their revolution for... Not saying that's good I am saying that's pretty awful, but they did actually turn into a stable government for decades. I do not think that anybody in the current, I guess, revolutionaries, again, for lack of a better term, I do not think that their ideology leads into any kind of, even for a couple of years or months, stable. As you can see in CHAZ, that fell apart in, hours. So... But what would the damage is, though, is not necessarily what happens after the revolution. The damage is what comes during the revolution. And 9 out of 10 Democrats, they're going to be getting bloodied up in the streets, just like that Wisconsin guy. So I hope that guy's a reminder or warning sign to the rest of the Democrats that are not Nancy, that are not Maxine or Adam or all the other nuts ones, that aren't like the popular ones. Just there's probably a couple thousand Democrats that are, more or less human beings between the state and federal governments, and they're the ones that are going to get drug out in the street right alongside the Republicans and the conservatives and the libertarians.
So I don't think that the Marxists are going to actually gain power. I think that there's not enough of them, and they don't have enough power yet at this current calculus right now to get power. I don't think that the Democrat establishment is willing to, because they're actually fighting against them right now.
Well, I guess they thought they power. I'd say that they're not doing too bad right now on power. I mean, they have a few members like Ocasio-Cortez in there, but as far as the control of the Democrat Party, they don't have the numbers, and I think that the general population does not support them. But I guess, I mean, maybe
for the revolution to work, the general population to support you.
Well, maybe they won't. I don't know. There's been
a lot more than they currently have. Come on, let's be realistic. They don't have at this current moment enough support or personnel to actually have an effective revolution. Now that could change in a couple years.
Well, no, that's what I was saying earlier. Is I don't think that even the best case scenario that this leads to any kind of successful revolution, but certainly in the attempt, the damage done during the attempt, because the revolution, after the revolution, isn't necessarily what's dangerous. It's the process of the revolution where typically your most dangerous times are going to be for those currently in power to flip over. And the reason why I was asking you about, like, what do you mean by power is certainly elected office in our current system, no, they're not going to have power, but not in that sense. But I would say they're not doing too bad for exerting authority. They're running around smashing stuff up. They took over some zones. They've got a lot of friendly city mayors that are standing down cops that are...
They're friendly for a reason.
The Democrats are very friendly to them.
The Democrats are letting them do these things because they see this turmoil, this violence as being beneficial to them currently. But as soon as it becomes not beneficial to them, then they'll turn. The media will turn on Antifa. The politicians will turn on Antifa, and suddenly it'll become bad. But right now, their strategy is, their calculus is that this will make people not vote for Trump. I disagree with their calculus, but I think that this turmoil, they're going to blame it all on Trump.
I guess to back up what you're saying, to like agree with you and give you evidence. Do you remember what happened to BLM in like February of 2017? They just disappeared. They just the inauguration happened. There was some unrest in D.C. and then February, March came around. Just BLM just disappeared for like a year and a half. Nobody heard anything from them. They didn't do anything. They didn't have any events. I remember pretty vividly because I'd found Crowder back in summer of 2016. I remember him following through that and in March after the inauguration. He's like, anyone heard from BLM lately? They were pretty big there for a while, and then where'd they go? So that, I mean, I guess that backs up your point a little bit. Is when they weren't useful, the BLM didn't get boosted because it was after the it was they'd already lost out. So I don't know. We could see if I don't know. It depends on what kind of game the Democrats are playing, right? So depending on the results of the election are. They may forget about BLM like they did last time, or they may continue what's going on here.
BLM currently is the useful idiots. Now that's because the Democrats assume that they're not really a danger. Now, if they ever grow to the point where they are a danger, I mean that could happen eventually. Right now, they're just being used as tools. But what everyone should be focusing on here is that the Democrats and the media that are refusing to call out the violence and are actually justifying said violence, they're okay breaking a few eggs to make sure that their political party remains in power. And by those eggs, I mean they're willing to let Americans be made destitute because they've lost everything they own, be killed and seriously injured in mass. They're willing to tear down our cultural heritage and what makes us us. They'll do anything to harm us as long as it benefits them. I don't know why anyone looking at this would vote for them. Even if you agreed with some of their political positions, right? You look at how they are refusing to defend anyone, Democrat, Republican, or whatever. They're refusing to defend you and your rights to your property and to your life and your ability to use your community. They're willing to burn down minority communities as long as it politically benefits them. Hey, come on.
Yeah, but you got
how do they still have a voting base?
The media, man, the media and social media too. Man, it is just it really is like this shaking your hand while you're pissing on your leg kind of a thing, where you got the media is just telling you, hey, like this is what's really happening, and meanwhile, people are like watching the media, like, wow, like it's peaceful protests, and they just want these like really reasonable demands, and they like kind of glance over the top of their TV screen and see the window behind it, and like the whole city's on fire, and like the statues are coming down. And like the cops are gone and people are breaking into their house, but the news is like, but it's peaceful breaking into your house. And I don't know, you just got a lot of people who I really think that we've underestimated. Let me restart here. The dystopian novelists kind of described this, and then the dystopian novelists of the previous century, they were getting some of that information just from the psychological experiments that we were learning on the cusp of the world wars, and just through the Industrial Revolution and how society was changing and kind of modernizing during the 1900s. There was a lot of psychology that was learned during that. As much as stuff changed in the last century, the amount of change in how humans process information in the last 20 years just because of the internet, there was no precedent for that. And I think it's been severely underestimated just how programmable a human mind is when you're just saturated with that much data coming at you all the time. And I think that's how, well, certainly that's how you get all these Marxists coming out of the colleges real quick. There's a lot of stories of parents, having these, good old boy kids. They send them off to college and they come back 4 years later and it's like, holy crap, like how did they change so fast? And I just think it's that constant flood of information. And that's part of what is getting people to do what I was saying earlier, where you're looking out your window and you're seeing the city burn down, and the media's sitting there telling you, and social media's telling you, like, hey, like, everything's good, everything's fine, just vote Democrat, and, like, this is actually the fault of the Republicans. And I don't know, it's hard. You hear, every time you hear whose fault it is, it's the Republicans' fault. It's Orange Man bad, it's conservatives, it's all this stuff, it's the authority figures. And you hear one time, maybe, because you got all the censorship and then there's just unified media front, not talking about the real problem being these liberal policies, these Democrat policies, Marxists in the universities and stuff like that. You don't, if you do hear that, it's maybe one time to every 10 times you're hearing the lie. And it's getting even worse. The math on that's getting even worse as we get more and more censorship.
I completely agree with you that we're trending the wrong direction. So, right, first off, you're completely right. It's provable that what you know and what you think is controlled by what information you are provided. And if someone controls the information you provide, they control you. They can make you think anything. That's what the studies have shown, that based on mind manipulation, they can. If they control the environment 100% on the information environment, then they can make you say or do anything. And
it doesn't. Again, It doesn't have to be necessarily conspiratorial. Just because the lizard people are behind the whole thing. I mean, it doesn't have to be that. It can be just kind of this coordination where everybody's kind of, the media kind of wants to stay in power, and they know that the Democrats are kind of their ticket towards that. And the Democrats want to stay in power, and they kind of know that the media is their ticket towards that. And the academics want to stay in power, and they kind of know that supporting the Democrats is their ticket to that. And the same thing with the unions. And it's all just this kind of like alignment of interests rather than a broad conspiracy of coordination. But the end result is the same, where you have just that saturation of false reality hitting you 24/7, and you're lucky if you get a few seconds a day where it's you get a break in the window. Oh, that's funny. For some reason the audio is playing through like my outside speakers instead of over the desktop speakers.
Why does she sound like she's in a tin can?
Because it was playing over my like desktop speakers, and then it came in through the microphone. I don't have the audio set to desktop playback. That was Slowpoke, though. He said, why would people doubt the news media? TV is their friend. Our friend. There we go. It would never lie to them. Normies are failing the shit test. They know what's going on. They just don't care. It reminds me of... I don't even know what it's from, but there's that kind of old clip that gets brought up every now and then of, I think, of some kind of 80s movie. But the guy is he's a television host. He's talking about the tube. You live the tube, you breathe the tube, you eat the tube. Everything comes from the tube. And that was back in the 80s when they were talking about just the television with 4 channels, and they were talking about back then about how damaging it was just to have all that information from 4 channels of fuzzy static coming in through your little teeny tiny TV. And they recognized that as a problem back then, because people were just sitting there just eating that up, and they're like, well, of course this is real. They spent all this money and technology to get this image to me. It must be true. And that kind of mentality followed us into the future, and the technology and the information flow only got more and more pervasive.
Yep. So get back to statues. So there is a lot of statues that are taken down recently. We got some of General Grant, right? Apparently people not understanding, like, he was very much a advocate against slavery. We had people take down statues of, what's his face? Columbus, Now, obviously, there's more of an argument for why he was never an advocate against slavery.
And for all the names, for all the names that you recognize, there's I've actually learned a lot of history the last 2 weeks, because there's been a dozen names I had no idea who they were. I'd never heard of them, and I'm hearing about all these amazing abolitionists, these great generals that were fighting the Civil War that weren't necessarily the popular, they didn't have the popular names that made it into like the 7 paragraphs your history book told you about. All these people that were working through civil rights, just different stuff going on, the history behind some of these, kind of cultural relics that you see pass by at the grocery store. You never give it a second thought. Some of the history behind that, some of the history behind some of these statues that they were gifted by various peoples who were thankful for the liberation that the United States gave to them, especially and including the slaves who were donated multiple statues. That's amazing. You come out of slavery, pretty much just having your entire life being just bled dry. And like the first thing you do when you get unchained is, I'm going to go donate money to buy a statue to like thank the people that liberated us. I mean, that really says something about how important that was to them. And I'm learning all this great stuff that it's a clear intentional failing of my public schooling that I went through, that I didn't know that before, because that was all skipped in the history books. And maybe if it's not even a guess. It would be obviously the people pulling that stuff down are in or about our age range, and they probably also went through those same history books that we had that were all picked out by the Texas school. Fucking Texas picks all the damn textbooks, but they went through those same textbooks that didn't have all of that wonderful information in there. They didn't bring that rich history of all these different people and what the importance of these events were, and what the importance of these generals were, and what that all really meant for slavery and the Civil War and America's path forward. I didn't know that. They didn't know that, and then we took some different ideological routes, and it makes sense that they would not know the importance of that and pull it down. And I guess to the extent that there's a silver lining is that everybody who went through public school can kind of, as the statues are coming down, you get to learn that history you never learned.
So the thing is, the people that are asking or demanding these statues be taken down don't actually know the story behind any of them. And that's why they're recently have called for so many statues to be pulled down, or have actually pulled them down themselves, that actually were, memorials in support of people who were opposed to slavery, or, were something that was a positive message for human rights, not a negative. So a great example of that would be the Emancipation Memorial, which is at the Capitol, and it's a statue of Lincoln standing over a black man who was supposed to represent the last freed slave, and the last one that was taken in by as a how they'd send groups out to recapture slaves.
Yes,
he was the last one that had been recaptured, that had been released. And there's a real guy who actually it was crafted after. And so it's him standing up from a kneeling position with his chains having been broken, and it's him looking up at Lincoln, who had made that possible, right? And this statue was commissioned by a group of freed slaves. And this is the statue that, when it was unveiled, had a speech from Frederick Douglass and also General Grant, both of who were obviously huge activists against slavery and for emancipation. So this statue has a lot of history behind it. The people, and there's a lot you could learn from it. It is an opportunity for someone seeing this to learn about our history and about both the evils of slavery, but also how our nation overcame those evils, right? How we grew as a nation and became better. It is part of our shared heritage and our growth from where we were to where we are now. And they want to destroy that. And I think we've already discussed why they want to do that, right?
Well, I was going to go into a little bit more detail on that, but I did want to respond to chat real quick. Howitzer, I missed when you said that was the word I was looking for, so I don't necessarily know the context, but I do know that, yes, that probably was the word I was looking for, no matter the context.
What word?
Word I can't say on stream.
Okay.
But no. So what you were just saying is we kind of know the reason that they're destroying the statues, and I think you're alluding back to when I said it was really just about the destruction.
Yes.
And I wanted to elaborate on that, and it's really there's been a lot of parallels drawn, well, direct parallels, direct accusations that this is the American Taliban, the American ISIS, because that's what ISIS and the Taliban, well, more so ISIS, Taliban, they're all baddies. They're all baddies. But ISIS really industrialized iconoclasm, and it was erasing everything that was before Muhammad, because they saw that as the beginning of history, and they wanted to make sure that everything was just absolutely blown out to powder. It didn't matter if it was part of the history of the region. A lot of stuff they were breaking was Sumerian, which I believe is that's the world's history. It's humanity's history. They are in a very historic region for humanity going back several thousand years. And it is a utter shame that we have such fuckwits tending to what should be humanity's heritage as to where we came from. Our attempts to struggle through creating various civilizations and experimenting with how to build empires for several thousand years. And all this amazing technological advancement, mathematical advancement, and agriculture that got us to where we are now. All of that was wonderful trial and error, and they're sitting there just destroying it. Not for any particular ideological reasoning, and I will get to those lemons. Thank you very much for... Actually, that was an ice cream. Thank you, Howitzer.
Thank you.
Great ice cream. I love ice cream. A little too much. But it was more about just destroying it because it wasn't because they were against it in particular. It's just because it wasn't Islam that it had to be destroyed. Everything that is not Islam had to be rolled under. It had to be destroyed and buried and forgotten. That is, in their idea, the goal, the ideal caliphate would be to have erased the entire history of the world, and it just always was the caliphate would be their end goal on that. And similarly, that would be the Marxist goal, is that it's not about that they particularly oppose these figures. That's just a red herring. That is just them giving any excuse that they think will give them cover, is saying, oh, well, these were slave owners. No, it's just about destroying everything that was not the revolution. Everything that is not their ideology has to be purged. Otherwise, they can never get to their utopia where it just always was and always is the party. There was no before. There was no history about that. And in the same way that ISIS was destroying that thousands of years of trial and error for how to build a civilization that humanity went through, the left, the Marxists here in America, they are destroying the history of the trial and error that we had with civil rights, which is probably as important as, even going back to all the wonderful civilizations that were built up and collapsed for thousands of years back in the Middle East. Here, I think that, same thing is this trial and error with civil rights, this trial and error with how do we keep human liberty as an ideal? How do we maintain that? That was new and unique in America and the colonies, and then into the fledgling state that we forged for ourselves. And it took us a couple hundred years to get that figured out. We're still working through it, and they want to destroy all of that history because there cannot be this process of trial and error. There cannot be progression in the past. It has to all be destroyed so that it's only ever been the party. It's only that one history that they have, and it must be eternal, both directions on the time axis.
Right. So the big takeaway is that they if they don't really care about Black lives, because in their activism, their revolution, they have freely mocked and used racist terms to refer to black people. They've attacked and killed black people. They've destroyed the property of black people, and the largest percentage of the Antifa members that are at these supposedly BLM protests are white people who are young liberal white kids, right? They have demonstrated through their behavior they don't care about black lives. They don't care about racist like neo-Nazis because they are racist. The only thing they're just using these as excuses. They don't care what these statues mean. They just want to tear down our history. And the reason why they want to tear down our history is history has this annoying attribute to it where it has lessons that you can learn from it, from people's previous actions, and you actually can, if the populace has access to their history, they are more easily able to criticize and see the flaws in what the current leaders want to do, right? But if all you know is what the people currently in power have told you, then they are always right. That's why Kim Jong-un is a god, and why everything he does is ordained by the gods. That's why everything he does is perfect, is because everything his people know come from him. They have no knowledge of history outside of what he has said they can know.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is it allows... Well, it's not even really the other thing. I guess it's just reiterating your same point, is Kim Jong-un had to... I think the North Korean people kind of know, but they they have to... They know their new history at gunpoint, so it's slightly different, but it's kind of the same idea. Kim Jong-un had to erase history, whether it be just by at gunpoint forcing them to remember it the other way, so that he could be the big hero. If there is a history, then you've got all of these great accomplishments that are attributed to historical figures. But if you erase that, then those accomplishments get to be reattributed to the party leaders in the present. And I think you can also reattribute the problems, right? So right now they're running through trying to cancel a lot of these historic cultural icons that have statues. These single names that represent these broad events that happened, that played out across the entire country with, hundreds of thousands of citizens all over the place. But there's these nexus point individuals like Martin Luther King and Lincoln and Grant that are, they kind of embody what a lot of other people were also working to, but they were just like the point leaders. But there's kind of a more generalized history that the left has already successfully erased, which is, prior to civil rights, for all the atrocity that happened during that, they have erased that the African American community had extremely high marriage rates. They had extremely low divorce rates. There wasn't a thing with fatherless households. They all dressed to the nines. They had a very religious, very high values, good, strong family structures and community structures, and they've erased all of that history, and it's been forgotten. And you hear a lot of the rhetoric from BLM right now that is trying to pretend that the current problems with the African American community, that the current struggles that they're facing, that those have always been since slavery. That it's been since slavery that fatherlessness was at this level, that poverty was at this level, that the black on black crime was at this level, that police shootings were at this level, and they've deleted that those didn't used to be problems. And they've also erased that those problems largely came about through Democrat welfare policies and, for better or for worse, Joe Biden's crime bills that he sent through in the 80s and 90s. But that was all Democrat stuff that led to those issues, and they've since erased that it didn't used to be like that, and then they've erased where the actual problem was pointing to, and they've rewritten the history that it's always been a problem, and that it was always the Republicans that had made it that problem. It was conservatives that made it that problem. It was white people that had made it that problem. And so they've reattributed that problem, those problems that community faces, to other people, and they've been able to do that because they've erased the history. And so they're just free to rewrite it as is.
Yeah, and if you're still in any doubt that they have rewritten history, just look at how it is culturally accepted that the Republican Party is the party of the neo-Nazis and the racists. How did it come to be that the Republicans are the party of racism when it has always been historically the Democrats? That is one hell of a rebranding.
Yeah, that's by far the largest, and I imagine that was. That one seems a little coordinated. I don't know about the conspiracies on that, but that was certainly one of the biggest flips that they did. One of the theories is that kind of that, and then the beginnings of the Marxist takeover of the universities that we saw, that kind of happened during Vietnam era, and that it wasn't necessarily a conspiracy. It was just that all the people that didn't dodge the draft, they went. And a lot of your more traditional Americans that would enlist in the military, they all went overseas, and it left you because you could get an exemption if you went to college, and it just left those colleges all open. There was professors leaving and stuff like that too to go over, and it just kind of opened up that there's all these blank spaces, and the Marxists just kind of filled in the gaps there. And then by the time Vietnam came home. Well, we know how they got treated, and it's the universities they just really never recovered. And I think that's probably about the time when they were able to flip the history on at least the Democrat Party. That might be getting a little too outside the topic.
Yeah. So
Dara's like, yeah, get back on topic.
I mean, we have a pretty fluid topic as it is. So
this is our least notes we've ever had.
Yeah, this is accurate. In any case, the CHAZ, there has been some pushback now. First off, we have the governor of the state finally coming out and saying that they're not going to allow it anymore. They're done. The same governor that wasn't even aware it happened, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess when you got enough bodies to stack to block up a whole street, it's. I was making the joke back at the beginning of CHAZ that their garden, communist gardens usually work a little bit better when you water them with blood. Or that seems to be how the communist gardens are usually run, is they usually have to water the fields with blood because there's not been a single communist revolution that has not had mass genocide of the opposing viewpoint, followed by slaughter of the farmers, followed by nobody knowing how to farm, but we do have all of this blood to water with.
Well, you haven't done it properly yet.
Yeah, but CHAZ has gone through the similar process where they had a really shitty farm because nobody knew how to farm. They kicked out all the farmers. But now they've got 4 bodies worth of blood that they can go water their garden with.
How convenient. And we also had, in this last week, President Trump has said he's going to put up the National Guard unarmed to protect the monuments in the Capitol.
What else did he say? He was talking about the War Memorial Act or something like that. You hear about that?
Yes, he's promised to put people in jail for 10 years if they damage war memorials.
I don't want promises, and I miss campaign Trump when he was like, we're not going to tell him the strategy, we're just going to do it. I want him to, instead of telling me that, oh, well, we're planning on putting people in there for 10 years. No. Let's not pretend that there has not already been those crimes committed. Those are laws that were on the books before 10 minutes ago. I would have much rather him come out with a tweet that was like, by the way, here's 700 Antifa, and they're all in jail for 10 years. Don't say I don't do nothing. We did it. That's what I wanted to see. I wanted him come out to say, we did this. Not that, well, we formed a committee to form a plan that will advise on if we should consider following this law.
You know what bothers me is each time he says he's going to enforce a existing law, and all the Democrats kind of say, how could he possibly do this? I mean, these are laws you guys passed. Jeez, what's wrong with you? This law pre-exists Trump. I mean,
well, that's another thing too, and I think that goes. It relates a little bit back to what I was saying earlier about just so much information coming at you. But it's pretty common psychological phenomenon that if you're talking to somebody and like even if you know that they're wrong, but they're speaking very confidently, they can usually trick you into like they reach into like that deeper lizard part of your brain. Yeah, not the lizard person, but the older part of your brain. As long as they're speaking confidently, there's something deeper inside of you that believes them, even if logically you know that that's not correct. And so, like, the Democrats will just sit there and they'll very confidently that this is absurd, what Trump is doing. And in your head, you kind of know, like, didn't the Democrats pass those laws? Like, they certainly helped sign on to that. They did this with the war, right? When we went over to Afghanistan, they say very confidently, this war is terrible. Bush is a mass murderer. He's a war criminal. It's like, didn't you guys vote for that? But they just say it so confidently, and the media will repeat it. The media commentators will repeat it confidently as well. And so, like just what you said though, Nancy will be like, how could he possibly do that? And the average person just hears how confidently she's saying that, and then they'll hear the media pundits confidently backing her up, and it's just, where do you even go to find out the information? How would you even go look up to verify that? The common person doesn't have time for that, and then they just believe this false reality that it must be that Trump's a tyrant for doing this. It makes sense that the Democrats are against this because they're so confident that this is bad. So I guess that's what I have to believe. Thank you very much, Timberwolf, for the 7 lemons. And Howitzer coming in with another ice cream. Heck yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Yeah.
Confidence.
Let's just say it confidently, and then we are expected to believe it. But I mean, I don't know what makes us different.
All you can talk
right?
about
Well, it's because
is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Slowpoke has given us $2, and he said it's called the Bavarian Fire Drill. Basically, say nothing and act like you know what you're doing, and everybody will believe you do. Yep, that's a common. Well, it's common for a couple different tactics. I know I've used it for leadership purposes. It's every psychological tactic has a good and a bad use. It's like any tool. The tool is amoral. Its morality is in who is wielding it. And so that's certainly the case that is a thing that's used. I was gonna say something and I forget what it was. Slowpoke interrupted me, but the $2 was worth it.
I very much appreciate it. So, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, I think this is all going to go like, okay, if Trump gets elected, and he should be, I think, currently, even though I don't think he's done everything right, I think he should be elected. If he does, this is just going to continue for another 4 years of wanted violence, as long as it benefits Democrats.
Lemon.
And I think that they're going to evaporate if the Democrats win, or if they do act up, they're going to be called out for being bad finally.
I don't know. I think if the Democrats win, I think that they do a two-pronged front. One will be physical in the streets to try to get the Gen Xers and Boomers online for as long, like on board, like on message, just because they're less online than younger generations. They haven't been through the horrific schooling system quite as much. They haven't been educated properly, so they'll need to go bash some windows and burn down some suburbs probably. This is if the Democrats win. And then their second prong will be continuing social media, continuing to go after making sure that the voices like ours are as permanently and thoroughly removed as possible, probably via some kind of abstract law they will dream up to pass. This is like worst case scenario that they get full control of the branches. I think that the violence continues either way. I think
that once they get power, that it will benefit them for there still to be chaos and more violence and damage and property.
So I think you're still thinking of the Democrats as kind of like this unified party.
They're not, no, but I think the people currently in charge of the party are still the majority of the elites.
It is a cluster of warlords, though. So you look at other environments that actually have more traditional warlords, and stability, no matter how much power they have, stability is never in their interest. I won't necessarily pretend to know the dynamics of it, but certainly I can see the pattern that warlords will continue that chaos. They're not a unified organization. They're these little tribal leaders, and that's what I'm seeing in the Democrat Party. That's why I was saying earlier, for every 9 Democrats, that's like this Wisconsin guy where he's just, a reliable voting pattern and doesn't really realize what's going on until he's getting drug out in the streets and getting a black eye. For every 9 of those, you got one Nancy Pelosi or a Maxine or an Adam Schiff. That's kind of they're the little fiefdom warlords of their little area, and it's even for them, it's not necessarily in their interest to have a unified Democrat Party. They just need to keep the chaos going, and I think that's their strategy.
That's definitely the strategy of, say, the Ocasio-Cortez types. But the way the Democrat Party, the elites, is set up is they are very much dependent on a core structure where they all share funds and all back each other, and there is a definite leadership to the party.
Yeah, but that's all out the window now. So
they still have a lot of power.
Yeah, well, you're talking about funds and stuff like that. I mean, not to go super far out the windows here, but I mean, look at the way the economy is currently set up. You have such absurd wealth imbalance, and you have the Fed. I mean, in the last 6 months, the Fed has tripled or quadrupled the amount of U.S. dollars that are in planet Earth. And all of them went into hedge funds where that are 50 people are getting all of this money. Meanwhile, the regular grunts on the ground, people are making, from that perspective, if you're making less than $500,000 a year, you're a grunt on the ground. Losing jobs, losing your funds, losing insurance, having your buildings and businesses burned down, all that stuff. The Democrats, the problem is, previously, before the economy got I guess what I'm saying is the wealth distribution. That's a more appropriate term. Before the wealth distribution got so absurdly out of whack, and then just the way the technology works now, as opposed to even 10, 15, 30, 40 years ago, this time's different. They don't actually need social stability to retain that power, the money, to the extent that it's worth anything. They don't need that anymore. They can maintain power through digital technology and information technologies. They can maintain funding through the Federal Reserve just pumping money by the trillion into hedge funds that will turn around and donate that money to these guys. And the stock market, the NASDAQ will go up to 50,000 under Biden probably, and then, everybody on Main Street's going to be doing worse and worse and worse. But we can look up at those records at the NASDAQ, and then for some reason, Nancy will go from somehow, after working in Congress for 30 years, making $100,000 a year, Nancy's amassed $43 million. During the course of 4 years of Biden, she'll probably amass another $40 million. That's
so what you've just described, though, does not back up the argument that you now are going to have the power structure that's built up around the Democrat Party and their hierarchy and how they control messaging, and they'll destroy any dissent because they will pull back support. They'll actively attack someone who defects. That power structure that is ingrained in a lot of different or like in the media and throughout the political structure, that doesn't evaporate because there's now a lot more money flowing around, and a lot of people in the Democratic Party, the elites, are even richer now. That doesn't evaporate. I know there's more ways you can get money, but that it's not all about money either. It's also about political support and messaging. They will make anyone look like a Nazi if they are the other side, right?
Yeah.
Antifa is only good as long as they're politically beneficial. But as soon as they're not, they're bad.
Well,
Trump is evil?
Yeah, but like,
what's a Republican?
What's your mechanism that would make Antifa no longer useful to the Democrats?
So once they are actively unseating Democrats and attacking Democrats, like, and
yeah, but that's
to agree
what
that makes them uncomfortable.
That's what I was saying with like the warlords. I mean, like they don't care. Like what does Nancy care about this Wisconsin state senator? What would ever cause her to care about that?
So she does care about losing her seat in power. So if she loses Democrats who are, in the structure that are helping keep her in power, then she cares. She cares about Ocasio-Cortez. Ocasio-Cortez actually started damaging the Democrat Party from within, and that's why the Democrat Party is going to war with Ocasio-Cortez and the squad.
Yeah, they kind of leashed Ocasio though. They flipped her more than she flipped them.
That's why I'm saying that power structure is very powerful.
Well, and then you look at Nancy too. I mean, she's not kept in power because some guy in Wisconsin has a state senate seat. She's kept in power because she's in a D+40 district. I mean, that's well, no, I mean, it's power also. So that's one level of power she has. But having the speakership as well as having her party main power gives her more power. Yeah,
so
but
she wants the presidency and the Senate and the House because that gives her power. Even if she stays in the House, it gives more power.
I don't see how. Well, the reason why I don't see how Antifa ceasing its violent destruction of cities, how that translates into the Democrats retaining stability. The reason why I don't see any correlation between that is because there has not been a correlation between that. Ocasio-Cortez just got her. She just won her primary after all the crap she did in New York with the Amazon deal, all of her support of the violent riots and looting in New York and other cities. She just handily won her primary. Now she's got to go up against a Republican, which I'm sure she'll win that. But I don't see a correlation between the Democrats allowing Antifa to destroy the cities and that somehow translating to people aren't going to support the Democrats. Because what that's actually doing is what we're seeing. We're seeing, we saw from the lawsuit in the CHAZ, right? So that the small businesses that are unfortunately inside the occupied zone of CHAZ, they are suing the city, and in their lawsuit, they stated that it wasn't really the fault of the protesters. They wanted to make sure that it was their thought that as the unified businesses in the lawsuit that the protesters were fine. It was okay. It was just this weird conglomeration of events that they're going to be suing the city for damages. But don't attribute those damages to the other people. Also, Black Lives Matter. Also, all this other stuff. So really, Antifa's been, as opposed to making people say, hey, I kind of had it with the Democrat Party. They're letting these people burn down my business. Antifa's actually done a really good job of making people bend the knee further, quite literally. So that's where I'm saying I don't see any path forward. I don't see a mechanism where the Democrats suddenly no longer need Antifa to be violent. In fact, I think that we'll see similar to how... it's always cliche to bring up the Nazis, but you look back to the Nazi Germany and other other fascist states that rose, they all had their black shirts, their brown shirts, and those didn't stop after Hitler got into power, after Stalin got into power. Those continued on. So the Antifa being the modern, well, they're literally the black shirts from the past. They even take the same name. But once the Democrats secure more power, I don't see a reason for their foot soldiers to back down and stop getting the people to bend the knee. I just don't see a mechanism where that stops.
So right now they are the damage they're doing. First off, you said that you don't see how them causing destruction and mayhem is going to stop the Democrats or make the Democrats be able to stop them. But that's not right now. They're helping them in their mind, right? Them causing destruction is not hurting the Democrats in their mind. They think this is helping them.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't.
But if it stops helping them,
I don't see how it stops. I mean, like, yes, if it stops helping them, but I don't see any path where it doesn't help them. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I agree with you. If some magic thing happened and they no longer were helpful, yes, the Democrats would turn on them. But I don't see currently the path. I guess that's what I was asking you is, what's that path that you see that fills in that blank spot where the if is?
Right now, I don't think that I don't see anything I don't foresee something happening where they aren't benefiting from this, right? But if I were to, because I don't think this is going to happen, but the hypothetical would be if the Antifa was actively going over and trying to unseat them from power. Right now, the Antifa is very much focusing on unseating Republicans and causing destruction to our history and calling out this non-existent white supremacy, and it's all feeding into the Democrats' playbook and helping their messaging. Right? It's putting pressure to silence their critics. So of course, this is just helpful to them. But if that were to change, yes. The Democrat Party would not allow them to be themselves to lose power because of this group.
Well, I guess that goes into my previous point too. Is that I don't think the Democrat, like the DNC as a party, I don't think it matters whether or not the DNC's got power or whether or not it thinks it's got power. I think that people like Nancy are sufficiently detached from the need of the DNC, that even if Antifa starts turning on state senators or your random that senator that you don't even know or your congressman that you don't even know from the federal level, I don't think that even if the DNC kind of is upset about it, I don't see that's not going to affect Nancy. So
yeah, it's not going to affect Nancy, but you're saying that she doesn't need the DNC as if she wasn't the DNC.
well, yeah, but I guess the other point too is like it's not the DNC a little bit, but like it's not Democrats at large all supporting this. It is individual, like the leaders, the high points of it. It's the mayors of the big cities. It's these recognizable congressmen. But like obviously like this random no-name Wisconsin state senator, I mean, he might have been passively supporting it just because he follows the party line and he thinks, well, the party line from his perspective is whatever Nancy says. So I guess it's, if Nancy wants to start sacrificing parts of the party, I really don't think that the party itself is autonomous enough to actually decide that Antifa is no longer useful. I think that Antifa only becomes no longer useful if Nancy herself and like Maxine herself,
close people,
yeah, like those people, like those like individual names, not as a shapeless party, but those names, if they think that if it's not affecting them or if they can continue directing the mob elsewhere, they will keep it going until there is no one left in the DNC.
Well, that's fair because whoever is currently in charge, which happens to be her and a few other individuals, it's all about them maintaining their power, and all the other underlings, they are going along with their directions so they can build their power. So yeah, you're right. It's more about who affects the top of members of the party. Now they do recognize that losing seats to a radical that's not under their thumb or to a Republican that threatens their power, and thus that's why they do so much strategizing and spending of money in certain races to try to win other races, because those races help build their power as well.
Yeah, seems just good voter intimidation. Democrats are no stranger to that. They
experts, you might say.
Yeah, they were the founders of Jim Crow, which was all about, and like what they do, like the poll taxes and like IQ tests and stuff before you could vote. Which
IQ tests,
maybe for other reasons we should go back to that. But I digress. But that's that was in their playbook even 50 years ago. And so, I could see Antifa doing something like that. I mean, the Black Panthers, not that they're necessarily led by the DNC at current, they've had a few showings at different polling locations the last few years, and tried to do something like that. I think that you might see a more unified front from Antifa, possibly directed. I mean, I could very easily see a scenario where one of the congressman is saying something about, like, it'd be nice if there was like some security, people don't feel very safe, and then Antifa shows up and the Republicans are like, hey, that doesn't make us feel safe, and the media is like, you got a bunch of racist conservatives, and they're all saying that these these nice peaceful protesters that are helping out with the polls, that they're intimidating them.
Peaceful protesters helping out with the polls. That sounds so much like CNN. Yeah. I believe it.
It's just it's these layered issues, and I hate saying, like, I'm reverting back to my previous points, but you got a lot of layers here, but I think that the glue that holds them all together, as what we were just talking about earlier, is this false reality that is able to just continuously onslaughted all hours of the day, as much information as your brain could possibly process, is just this false reality just getting shoved in your face 24/7. And so even if it just doesn't matter what happens, whoever is in control of the media will be able to, and the social media will be able to continue falsifying what is really going on. I mean, the protests, well, here I am. I do it again. They get me, and I've talked about this on the show before. They got Dyer and I. It's in your head to call them protesters, because there's even a CNN article. I meant to say rioters. There's a CNN article about this Wisconsin state senator that got the shit kicked out of him, and CNN says protesters beat the congressman. They're not protesters at that point. Like, good God. Like, would they ever do like a domestic violence case like that? Be like, oh, like a male protester, beat his wife, but he was just protesting peacefully. Like,
he's protesting his wife.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And so, like, that's me. And like, I'm, I think you were asking earlier, Dyer, like, what makes us different? I think it's because we are focused on it, and we're trying to logic through it, and we try to understand it. If you're just passively absorbing this, you're not actively, trying to go through the logic of it, or constantly analyzing it, or even fact checking, or looking for other sourcing, or hearing other points of view. That's how you just get that default programming. I don't necessarily think that we're different. It's just that we're more intentionally reviewing the information that's coming into our brains. But I forget where I was going with that. But so that's why I would say, like, the protesters, but I mean to say rioters, because it even gets into my brain, even though I know what's going on with it.
So that was all I had for notes, actually. Do you have anything else on your notes?
I didn't have any notes. That was all me.
Wow. Oh, good job. I'm impressed. Good job.
Yeah.
So we have anything you guys else want us to talk about? We could talk about the Smollett case again.
Yeah, so that's actually funny, because that goes. I think that's where I was trying to get to. One of the issues when I don't have stuff written down, and I do enjoy this, like, free-form conversation, but as is a typical problem with human speech, is you have to run through a linear story, even though there's all kinds of branching stuff going on there. And I think one of the branches I was trying to get to was to the Bubba Smollett case.
There we go.
Because that was also that was a very, very crafted event where it was this reality of what actually happened, and then the media just forcing this fake event down your throat over and over and over again. It was very obvious this time too. We talk about this every now and then. Something will happen where the curtain gets pulled back just a little bit too much, and it's very, very obvious that the media is lying to you. And this was one of those events where you had the so to reiterate on the story, I think it was on Friday. It was at for NASCAR. They were racing at Talladega. There is this race car driver. His nickname is Bubba. I think his real name is Daryl. I don't remember. But they call him Bubba Wallace. And he is the first and only black driver to drive for NASCAR, which is great for him. NASCAR is difficult. It's not like pro football. You got like about 1,000 guys. Maybe 500 that are on the first string. Maybe about 1,000 to 1,500 guys are good enough to play pro football in America. That's not a lot of people, given all the Americans that there are and all the people that want to play football. But NASCAR is even more exclusive. You're down to like 50 people. So you got to be really good. I'm not a NASCAR fan. I don't follow very much, but I do know that you got to be really good to be a NASCAR. So he didn't just get there for no reason. He got there because he's a good driver. Now, from my understanding, he's not good enough to have actually risen to the top of the top 50 at any point in time. He's not good enough for that, but he was good enough to at least get himself out on the track. So kudos to him for that. He was, I believe it was last week, one of the other NASCAR drivers had a Confederate flag on his car. And Bubba has taken it on himself to represent Black Lives Matter because he's a default black guy. My life matters, which is actually kind of funny because they've been very upset at the American flag, Black Lives Matter, and so he has a Black Lives Matter shirt on and an American flag face mask on, which is very interesting. But anyways, he told NASCAR that they need to get rid of the Confederate flag, and NASCAR agreed. I don't think it's worth going into the nuances of that. It's just take it as a fact of things that happened last week, is that Bubba didn't like the Confederate flag, and NASCAR said, yep, we're going to get rid of it. And so this other race car driver that actually had it painted on his car as part of the decals, he had to take it off. Moving on, so Talladega, they were racing over the weekend, and the Bubba thinks one of his pit crew found a noose in their garage. The way it was reported was that the media reported it, that Bubba himself found the noose hanging in his garage. And the way the articles were written is you just imagine that they kind of like open the garage door and just like right there in the center of the room is just a real big fat noose, and you're like, wow, damn, that's intense. You think it's this big thing, and you think it's this real dramatic. The way that they painted it in the articles, there's this real dramatic moment where like Bubba walks in there, and it's a black man staring down this noose. And it's like, wow, somebody just put that in there to like try and intimidate you. And they were trying to like theorize that it was somebody was pissed at him because he got rid of the Confederate flag. Maybe it was even that driver that had to change his car, and that this was a hate crime against Bubba Wallace because they were going to put a noose there for him. And then there was this whole thing. NASCAR ran with it, believing it right away. They did this big event where all the NASCAR drivers and the team leaders, they all, like, which is a big deal to get all the NASCAR drivers, all of them. And you're talking about 50 different teams. You got to coordinate all this event with them. It's a big deal. They all pushed Bubba Smollett's car down the pit lane, which is it's kind of an honored thing to like push somebody's car. It's something that they've done in the past for different things, but it's got meaning in the realm of NASCAR to be pushing someone's car like that. And they all walked with him. It was this big thing that all the drivers were like, this was awful. Like, we can't believe that this happened to you. Like, you're not a black man. Like, you're one of us. That was the whole thing with NASCAR. Is you're one of us. You're a racer. And it was a big unity moment. Everybody came out to support him. great. All the fans too were real pissed about it. I can't believe like somebody would do that. I'm sure a lot of people had their doubts about it. I had my doubts about it. I know some other commentators had their doubts about it. Sure, Dyer had his doubts about it. But they were running with the story, and one of the commentators, I think it was Ben, he was pointing out, one of the things that kind of led a lot of people who had their doubts to kind of say, okay, I'm going to just stay quiet for a little while, is because NASCAR itself, like NASCAR, the organization, came out and was like, this is real, this happened. And it was like, wow, I think it was Andrew Wilkow. I was listening to him, and he's like, they've got NASCAR is very, very expensive. He's talking about a lot of millions of dollars of equipment in those garages, and they've got lots and lots and lots of cameras everywhere. And it would make sense that, well, if NASCAR is saying it happened, then they probably have some camera footage of it, because every square millimeter of those garages is covered with 18 cameras. And so, why would NASCAR say it unless they had evidence for it? And then over the weekend, and I think it was Monday or Tuesday, the FBI came out. The FBI came out, 15 agents. I bet you Trump's free and clear if they had that many agents that were free. They're probably not trying to do any kind of crazy stuff for the next election. They had so many free agents. So they had 15 FBI agents came out to investigate this as a hate crime. That's a lot of FBI agents for a hate crime there. And what they ended up finding out was that Bubba didn't actually find the noose. There wasn't a noose. Spoiler alert. But it was one of his pit crew found it. So the media had already false framed the narrative that it was a dramatic moment that he had found it himself. Then it was found out that it wasn't actually a noose. It was a loop on a rope. And I will explain what the knot was in a second here. Remind me if I forget about that, Dyer. Okay. But there is the garages at Talladega Raceway. They're manual garages. You guys, I'm sure most of you know what a garage door looks like. Most of you probably know what manual or what automatic garage doors are like. But sometimes they break, and you got the string that you pull on to open it up manually. And so these garage doors were meant to be always manual, and so they had a real big rope on them, so you could pull them up and down, and most of them had some kind of handhold loop on the rope. And it is this handheld loop on the rope that opens and closes the garage door that was determined by the FBI, by the 15 FBI agents, that is the quote-unquote noose that Bubba's team found. What was that? Does that Tuesday, Dyer? That the FBI? Okay, so that information, after all of this like 3 days of NASCAR and all the NASCAR fans and all the drivers and all the teams, big unity moment, like you're one of us, like all this stuff, like this is awful, like we need to find who did this, we need to get him out of here, this is awful. We had a lot of the left, a lot of the media using this opportunity to say NASCAR, this is evidence that NASCAR fans are all racists and awful people. There was, I believe it was the girl who was part of the 1619 Project. I could be wrong on that. But there was somebody, I think it was from the New York Times, that was saying, this is just, what do you expect? This is who NASCAR is for. Basically saying, this proves that NASCAR is for racists. So all this smear job comes out. It was very reminiscent of Gamergate, just kind of how NASCAR and the rest of the media, to the extent they were picking up on it back then, they'd just be like, yeah, like basically everybody who is in this industry that is a fan of this, like they're actually all racists, is basically what was going on there. And then you had Bubba was coming out saying, there was some doubt on Tuesday morning. By that time, there was some doubt the whole time, actually. But he actually said Tuesday morning on The View that anybody that doubts him is a racist. Racist. I can't roll my R's like Ben Shapiro does when he says it. But so that was Tuesday morning that he did that on The View. I think it was around 10 or 11 a.m. Eastern. About 3 or 4 Eastern, Like just a couple hours later, the FBI, the 15 FBI agents, they came out with a statement that basically said, there was no noose. It was just a loop on a garage. And they found via, as I said, all of that wonderful security footage, just blankets and blankets of surveillance coverage all over these garages because there's such high value equipment in there. They actually determined that probably even before October 2019, but at least October 2019, that loop had been on that rope for at least that long, but probably longer. And Bubba had not been assigned that garage until last week. They were only assigned the garages a week in advance. So now you might be thinking, well, there must be some conspiracy theory that somebody knew 9 months ago that they're going to be putting. You might think that's a crazy conspiracy theory. The left was actually trying to say that for a little while. I think they might still be trying to run with that a little bit. But so you had Bubba on The View in the morning on Tuesday after all this stuff. And he's sitting there saying, if you doubt me, you're a racist. And then you had about 6 hours later, the FBI said, yeah, actually, it just didn't happen. It's not true. And then later that night, Bubba goes on to Don Lemon's show. And he was like, yeah, I mean, it might not have been directed at me, but it was still a noose. I was like, oh, like, what are you implying by that? It's actually funny. If you can see if you can find that video clip on Twitter of Don Lemon, send it to me. It was really funny because even Don Lemon's face, you guys probably seen the clip on Twitter, but we'll try and find it for you here in a second. You can clearly see that when Don Lemon's like, yeah, like it was the FBI said that really wasn't a noose and it like wasn't directed at you. And then Bubba's just like, yeah, but it was still a noose. Like Don Lemon's face is just like, even he doesn't believe it, but like, he knows he has to. It was really funny. And then you've got, after that, the next day, the rest of the media still saying like, well, I mean, it was a noose, so like it still proves that like somebody was racist. Like just because like a noose on its own. Again, we went over a little bit ago. A tool is amoral. A tool is only good or evil in the hands and intent of humans. So if the noose, which I will go into again, the media kept reporting it even after the FBI said that it wasn't a noose and it wasn't directed at him. The media kept reporting it as a noose. It was not a noose. I will still get back to that. I know my knots because I was a Boy Scout, not because other stuff. Shh. But they kept reporting it as such, and the media kept trying to run with this that even though it wasn't directed at Bubba, it was still racist somehow. It's still implied. That like NASCAR drivers were racist. It's still implied that Bubba was being a victim of what was happening. It still implied all of this stuff, and it was just so wild because it was shown to be not true by an FBI investigation, and they still wanted it to be true. He still wanted to be the victim for it, and the media was still trying to keep this false reality going, this event that never actually happened. And it's the same thing with the Smollett case. This one just played out a lot quicker. The Smollett, we had to wait a couple of months to see the resolution on that. But this one just happened so quickly. It was just disproven again, and then the media wanted to keep running with it. So Dyer pulled me up this video, but before we play that, I do want to explain the knot. So a noose, obviously it has a limited set of uses. It does have other uses than for hanging people, but there are noose-like knots that are more appropriate for that. Also, a noose specifically to hang somebody, it's supposed to have 13 wraps. So if it is noose-like, but it does not have 13 wraps, technically it's not a noose. Not meant to kill somebody in that way. So there is other knots though. So the loop was meant as a handhold for when you're opening and closing the garage. A noose, when you pull on the loop, it will start tightening because it's meant to, be pulling on your neck and choking you to death and or snapping your neck, depending on if they were, a good knot tire or not. So that wouldn't be ideal for a handhold on a rope, right? So because if you're pulling on a rope, you don't want the loop that you're holding onto to like tighten up and grab your hand. So that's not an ideal knot for a handhold. That makes sense, Dyer?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So there's another knot that's actually extremely common in fishing lures that gives you, I don't know, I'm not a fisher, so I don't know what it's used for in fishing lures, but I do know that it's used for that. And it's also a knot that's specific to making the type of handhold in a rope that would be ideal for a garage. And it looks like a noose. The first several steps of the knot are actually identical to making a noose, but the last step is different. And from afar, it might look like a noose, but again, it wouldn't have 13 fraps on it, so it wouldn't be, it still wouldn't look as long as what an actual noose would look like. But the difference being is that last step changes that when you pull on it, it doesn't tighten up. And so it makes an ideal handhold to keep grabbing onto. And it's a common knot for people who know how to do knots. It has a purpose, and again, it's highly matched to the purpose of a drawstring on a garage. And so it would make sense that it would be there. So I don't remember what the name of that knot is, but it is not called a noose. It is a different knot. And that is my understanding that is what that knot would be. Because if that loop had been there as it was last weekend and had been there since October, at least, if it had been a noose, it would have tightened up after having been opening and closing the garage just a couple of times. That it stayed that loose for 9+ months implies to me heavily that it was definitely not a noose. Otherwise, it would have tightened up. It was highly likely to be. Now, I didn't get to inspect this knot myself. I unfortunately was not one of the 15 FBI agents sent down there. But
Darn.
The idea that the loop stayed that width consistently for 9 months under use, it would be impossible for a noose to do that because it would have tightened up. And if you're not familiar, I'm sure some of you out there have tied a noose or a noose-like knot at some point. I know you guys are a bunch of degenerates out there. But if you've ever done it, you would know.
Okay, shame.
Yeah. If you ever did it, you would know that if you pull on a noose and there's nothing in the loop to grab it, then the loop pulls through the frapping and then the whole knot just falls apart. So again, if that knot was tightening up every time somebody pulled on it, it would only take one time, and it'd probably hurt too because you're pulling enough weight on it to open up a garage. It's going to tighten up on your hand. It's going to hurt your hand, and then all of a sudden the loop's going to be real small, and so you'll probably grab on the frapping, and then you're going to pull that loop through, and then the whole knot's just going to fall apart. There's no way. I do not believe for a second that there's any possibility of a noose having been tied in October and not have fallen apart over 9 months of use on a garage door. It's just insanely impossible. And you're not hearing... This is a unique story. Like, the story I'm telling you right now as to how this knot works, you're not hearing this anywhere else. Even in conservative commentary, which I would expect to hear from conservative commentary a little bit more about how knots work. If we had some visuals, maybe I would have demonstrated how the knot actually works. But alas, I did not. So, without being 15 FBI agents, although maybe I should ask Dyer for a raise, because I apparently have the wisdom of 15 FBI agents.
No, more actually. Yeah, more wisdom.
Absolutely. It is impossible for that to have been a noose. But the media has continued saying that the noose was not directed at Bubba. There was no noose, but they keep reporting it as a noose. There was never a noose. And the media continues to say, even though it wasn't directed at Bubba, it was still a noose. And it being a noose, that means something. But it doesn't mean anything, because even if it was a noose, it had no intent to Bubba. Therefore, if there's no intent, then it doesn't mean anything. But it also never existed. It's just, the layers here are off the charts. It's just outrageous. And so one of the reasons why the media would like for this narrative to continue going on, and you can kind of see this in Don. He probably doesn't know all these things about knots like what I do, but he does know that it's a lie. And we're going to watch this clip here real quick, and you can see him talking to, wow, the screens are real screwed up today, guys. You guys just have to deal with that, but I'm not fixing them. Just deal with it. Don knows that this is a big lie. Don knows for sure this is a big lie. And he knows that Bubba's just building up this giant whale of a story here. And just watch Don's face here. Even he knows this is a bunch of shit. We'll take a watch here.
I'm pissed. I'm mad because people are trying to test my character and the person that I am and my integrity, and they're not stealing that away from me, but they're just trying to test that. And as a person, Don, that doesn't need the fame, doesn't need the hype, doesn't need the media, I could care less. I could give two craps about it.
For context, again, the fact that he's part of the group that's on the track consistently, great for him. He's a good driver. He has not been a winning driver, though. So this is a lot of people have made the parallels to Kaepernick, where Kaepernick, he was good enough to be part of that top 1,500 football players. A lot better than the rest of America at football. But he's not good enough to be the quarterback or the lead on anybody's team. That's kind of Bubba's story here. So he's not. He does need something a little bit extra. And we saw Kaepernick needed to get a little something extra because he didn't quite have the talent to rise ahead of the pack. That's a lot of people are making the same parallel with this guy. So when he's sitting there saying he doesn't need the fame, he absolutely does.
Yeah.
To sit there and read, and that's my problem. I'm reading too much into it and investing too much time into it. I am.
Don't.
I know. I'm trying hard not to, and after tonight, I'll probably turn my phone off. Unfortunately, until about 7:30 in the morning, where the interviews start back up again, and we get to it all over. But Don, to hear my side of the story, and I don't mean to steal your spotlight of the show, but my side needs to be heard. I don't know what time it was, about 5:30, 6 o'clock on Sunday evening after the race has been called. Garages are closed. My crew is on a plane back to North Carolina. I was about to go out to dinner with a couple of fellow competitors, and we were talking about what time we were going to leave, where we were going, and I get a phone call from, I'm in my motorhome. I get a phone call from the president, Steve Phelps, and it's a phone call, Don, that I'll never forget. It's one of those phone calls where you can automatically tell within the first couple seconds that something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And it immediately made me think of, what did I do? What am I getting suspended for? Like, what did I say wrong in an interview? Whatever it was. And so I'm thinking all the bad things or whatever it could have been that I had done, whatever I said. So he's like, we need to talk in person. So I'm like, okay. So he walks down the motorhome, opens up the door, and the look that he had on his face alerted me in a way that I'll never forget as well. And it's still thinking like, okay, what did I do? Let me know. And now, mind you, I got to the racetrack at, I don't remember what time, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and slept all day.
I don't think this was the clip I was looking for, Dyer. Yeah, there was another clip somewhere where he was telling Don that, it was still a noose. It was just like, it wasn't a noose, buddy. It just wasn't a noose. I'll see if I can find that clip while we'll keep talking. Dyer, you got comments on this? I've been talking for a bit here. Did Dyer leave? I've been talking for so long. Dyer just left me.
I did not leave. So, yet another case of a false hate crime. where someone who is famous is just trying to get ahead. That's all it is. But they're willing to malign all of America and feed into this false narrative that we're all racist to do it. I don't know. I don't understand how NASCAR plans to keep their audience and to keep treating their audience like they're all Nazis.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be a problem. I don't know. There's a lot of people that are. So this was a little too much. This was a little too much because of the doubling down after the fact. That and we saw this with Jussie Smollett. We've seen this with the countless hate crime hoaxes. I am of the belief, and this is an honest belief. It's not ironic or trolling. I do not believe that there has been a single actual hate crime in America that was committed against either an African American or a Muslim. I'll add that to it. I do not think that there's been a single legitimate hate crime in at least 5 years, because I've only seen hoaxes, and we've seen real big whoppers of hoaxes. And my theory is that they're big whoppers of hoaxes because the media gets onto these stories and they're like, ooh, this fits our narrative. We want to make this blow up. We're going to do this. And then it always comes out to be a hoax. They try to do that every time that there's some kind of quote-unquote hate crime. If there was actually a real hate crime, we would have known about it because the media would have grabbed onto it just the same. The media doesn't know that's a hoax until the end. They're finding out the same time we are. Now, what they do after that is try to keep it going. But they're finding out the same time we are. They're just, they're as quick to believe it as anybody else. But they're trying to blow it up because it fits their narrative. And so if there had actually been a real one, I think it would have gotten blown up. I think we all would have heard about it. It would have been like, oh man, like remember when that happened? But we don't see it. It just isn't. It just isn't a thing.
I'm not willing to make the argument to ignorance, but because just not having seen them does not mean they don't exist. I'm
omnipotent, so arguments to ignorance work for me. I appeal to my omnipotence. I'm trying to scroll through my timeline to find the right video, but I realize that there's 8,000 Fox pictures to scroll through, and that's just from today, so I don't think I'm actually going to find it. But there is a lot of Q Foxes, so it's not a total loss.
Yeah, not a loss. Damn. So, yeah, I think there is definitely not nearly as many hate crimes as is being reported. Since they put a super highlight on all these cases that end up being false, then you'd think they put a super highlight on any real cases. But I think the problem is the assumption is that they're looking for any real case. I think that there's a lot of like, this is someone who's famous and someone who can benefit from this. And there's a lot of people who are like, this is the right kind of case to highlight. I don't know.
Yeah, if it's the narrative. The narrative is America is racist. That's what they do. They wake up every morning. This I'm stealing this from somebody else who used it for Orange Man Bad. But it's kind of got similar ideas. The media wakes up every morning knowing that America is racist. They just need to go find the story about it. But they already know what the end result is. They're just looking for something that they can fill in that gap with. The original version of that is that they wake up knowing that Orange Man is bad. They just need to figure out how he's bad today.
That came from Tim Pool, didn't it?
No, that was I think it might have been Wilkow or Hannity. Can't remember. It was not Tim Pool.
It is correct though. So yeah.
And Tim Pool.
So they're. I don't think they actually look deep into actual all the possible cases. I think they just see, in this case we have a lot of intersections of what they're interested in. They are interested in destroying things that conservatives and America loves. So NASCAR, okay, check that box. Yeah. We got someone famous who has a following, famous in somewhat famous, right? So we get more people upset about it. If it's just like Joe Schmo, people are less upset about it than let's say a legitimate Nazi, just one of the two in America, commits a hate crime against Joe Schmo black dude. Now, people can get upset about that, but they'd probably be less upset about that, less awareness of it, than if that same hate crime were to have happened to someone who's black and famous to some degree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the other thing, too, is the opportunity cost for the media of being wrong is very, very low, as we can see, because they've been wrong so often on this. And we just, they'll just move on to the next story. It doesn't matter if they're wrong. That's part of the rewriting the history as you go along is, well, don't remember that they screwed it up. It's the history of now. Don't remember further back than 5 seconds ago. We're moving on to the next story. Don't remember that they literally 2 weeks ago had another false hoax hate crime about a noose, which we didn't cover on this because it was it was just a small time story. But there was another city 2 weeks ago during the COVID lockdown. When they locked down all the gyms, people had to get creative for how to go work out, and a black man had set up in a community park, a kind of impromptu workout area, and he had set up some ropes on a tree that people could use for whatever it is that you use ropes for when you're exercising, trying to reenact what it was in the gym. And he set them up for him to use. They were available for other people to use. He knew other people were using them. It was just fun exercise to go outside, do something, kind of remembering that you used to go to the gym, but you're not allowed to go there anymore. And then they also were not nooses, because what do nooses do when you put weight on the loop? They tighten up. They will, if your hand's in it, it will crush your hand, especially if you're putting all your body weight onto it. So a noose would not be an effective loop for a rope that you were working out on. And if that rope had been in the park for quite a while and a lot of people have been using it to work out on, I can imagine that loop would not have survived if it was a noose, because it would have fallen apart by then. But a busybody mayor walked by, and she decided they were a noose and they needed to be investigated as a hate crime. When it was found out that it was a black guy that had set it up for workout and that they weren't in fact nooses, she doubled down too. Again, this was just 2 weeks ago. She doubled down too and said that it still needed to be investigated as a hate crime because it didn't matter what the intent was. She thought they were nooses, so that means racism. And then 2 weeks later, they do the exact same thing with Bubba, and just over and over and over again. We see this all the time.
So I guess we're all going to develop a pathological fear of looped rope.
Yes. There was somebody took a picture. The memes for Bubba are so great. My favorite one was somebody took a tire iron, and they're like, "There's a burning cross found in Bubba's garage." It's just a tire iron.
Oh my god. Well, more fun.
Go camping and like smash all your devices. Basically, I think is what we all need to do.
Yeah, we need to take a friggin' break.
Yeah.
People are just so damn stupid. Vote Trump.
Vote orange.
Yeah, vote orange. I'm for the orange party.
Yeah, can we change up the colors? That'd be fun. We can do orange.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I don't even like. It doesn't have to stay Trump, you know. We could have someone else run on the orange party too, you know.
It could be the Trump party though, even without Trump.
That'd yeah. Like I like someone a little more conservative than Trump because he's not conservative. A little more.
What like Ted Cruz, where you're sitting there saying, "Hey, I think it's despicable that the statues are getting torn down."
No, I didn't say I'd do nothing.
Thanks, Teddy. Thanks, Ted. I think that too. I'm also not a sitting U.S. senator with the power to tell the Capitol Police to go do some freaking work. Thanks, Ted. Yeah. Great job. Nailed it.
I don't know if he has the direct power to do it, but he should be definitely raising hell every minute of every day and be submitting bills and or what's the word when you're trying to it's resolutions.
The resolutions are do nothing too. He's too busy. Ted Cruz is too busy voting that the Senate has this power that the Senate already has to subpoena people.
Not that kind of resolution. That's pretty simple, by the way. But no, like he himself, he can't just go out and direct the police himself. But he should, it's because he lacks.
He could try. He could try. I mean, go try something. I mean, even if he doesn't have the authority, which I think the Capitol Police are actually under the House. I don't think the Senate has control over it. I could be wrong on that. But try it. Go get Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is in the House. Go get up with Gaetz and tell Gaetz to go order the Capitol Police over there. Even if they don't go, at least you're like trying. Like, hey, we tried. It's like, no, they're just sitting there bitching about it on Twitter. It's like, well, that's what I'm doing. Like, I don't have a lot of other options for how I can like voice my opposition to this. I guess I could drive to DC and go stand out there with a gun and probably get arrested. But the
irony.
Yes, irony. But like, you know, people are like, oh, like you got to do something. Like all we do is talk. It's like, okay, yeah, but like, you know, that's why we elect people. And you know, I you know, to the extent that I would do something, I could. But there are people who like, as their job, as their position, they would be in a position to probably exercise some authority over that, and they're doing the exact same thing I'm doing.
The House is currently controlled by the Democrats. So all they could do is put up a vote and say, hey, or a resolution to tell the police to do this thing, and then have it be ignored by the Democrats.
Well, it'd be interesting if they could just get a couple of the Capitol Police to kind of go rogue. I don't know.
I bet they could.
Well, yeah, but they just tell them like, hey, like go guard these statues, and then what? Are the Democrats going to say we order the Capitol Police to like give the statues to the rioters? Like, that's not going to look good. It's not going to look good optically.
So
I really don't.
Long story.
Yeah, go ahead.
Long story short, yes, I think he's not doing anything. I was going to say not doing enough.
Who, Ted?
But he has to be doing Ted, yeah. I was going to say he's not doing enough, but he's not done anything. So enough to seem like an appropriate word. But he's definitely not doing enough or anything to deal with this problem. And just complaining about it is not what we need to hear. Yeah. It's not leadership, at least.
Yeah, like basically like on the spectrum of things that I can do and that you can do about this, like tweeting about it is like, you know, medium. Having a show about it is like a little bit extra, but like actually going there to physically defend the statue is like very, very, very extra, where we would have to like put ourselves in physical danger, risk arrest. Not that that's not something that we could do, but Ted Cruz could also put those statues in a state of defense without really putting himself in danger, without getting himself like he could do that at a lot easier level than we could, and he's also not doing it. So
all his risking cost to it,
yeah, like his cost is much lower than ours, but he's doing the exact same thing we're doing, where he's doing podcasts with Knowles, he's doing podcasts and tweeting about it. He's doing the exact same thing we are.
All you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth.
So are we in office?
Dare you?
Are we as good as him, or is he as bad as us? Slowpoke for $2 says, a friendly remember, this is why the Boogaloo will happen. The citizenry will be forced to act when the governorship won't, despite being aware. The citizenry will be forced to act when the governorship will not, despite being aware and capable of doing something. Yes. Yeah, the government is capable of doing something, and they're not. We're seeing that with the law enforcement stand-downs all over the country, and it's forcing the citizenry to pick up the responsibilities that the government previously had responsibilities for. There's probably a much longer discussion that we can have about that. That's actually something I want to talk to Dyer about offline, because I got some thoughts that are probably not the best to broadcast over the interwebs. But
I don't need to hear more of your porn fantasies, all right?
We will. They are not fantasies, Dyer. It's a wish list. I told you that the last time. But I got. We'll talk about that offline, Dyer. We'll try and figure out what a good presentation of that conversation online would be. Just so it's not crazy spieling back and forth. I need some sanity checks on some stuff for sure that I don't think that it's not even like I don't want to like say my opinion. It's like I don't know what my opinion is. I've got some ideas, but I need to bounce them off people that are probably not great to do online. So we'll talk about that another week, certainly. Well, all of our conversations are recorded by the FBI, Dyer. So
of course, yes,
and the NSA and China.
All right. Hey, I think that's it for today, right?
It is tomorrow for me, but yes.
Okay, well, we'll see you guys on Saturday for the weekly news recap.
Maybe, because I won't be here. And did I tell you Creed can't do it?
God damn it.
Do you guys want... Let's do an F in chat if you want to see Dyer on his own. I did a show all on my own.
I could do a show by myself, jeez.
I don't know. Dyer's never done a show on his own for a long time. It's been a long time, Dyer.
It has been a long time.
It's hard. It's not easy.
I can do it.
I believe.
But yeah, I mean,
I believe in your belief in you.
Maybe we'll bring Alpha B on just for a little bit.
Ooh, I'd like to hear her perspective on this because that would actually be good. Maybe instead of doing like a full news recap, just like have a discussion with her about her kind of viewpoint on this. Would it surprise you that she's actually way more aggressive than I am about certain topics? No, because I mean, she knows more. Like you and I know on an intellectual level where this leads. Like she knows viscerally where this leads. She's
felt it,
right? I mean,
yeah.
So I'd be real. I'd really like to hear her thoughts on that. I would definitely listen to it. So yeah. Well, I'm sure Dyer will figure something out. I will help him figure something out. And maybe I'll even if it's just an easy conversation, maybe I'll pop in. I certainly can't write though. But I would definitely be interested in hearing that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will see you guys on Saturday, and maybe Fox if the conversation's light enough. All right. See you guys then. Direwolf out.
Shaviz signing off. Thanks, guys.
Oops.
Where's the end button? The end button is like not in the position it's normally in.